Rabbi Kulek, tell us about a little about your background,
Where do you want me to begin?
wherever you'd like.
Um, okay. So I guess my story begins in Cleveland, Ohio. My my mother was a studious young teenager, and you know, for her first few years of high school, that's all she really did was stuck in the books.
Mm,
And she wanted to be more popular in the in crowd, so to speak. And along the way, she met this. She tells me this charming, good-looking
mm,
African American who, sure enough, he was the life of the party. Got her involved in all kinds of events and parties, and she's having a good time. She fell in love, and even though she was very, very young, she had in her mind that she wanted to have a baby, and that this
So
was the
she
right
so
person to
she
have
went
it with.
so she went from the studious girl to a person who was having all this fun with this Black
Oh,
American.
she's, my mother, I think she always kept her studies, from what I
Mhm.
understand. I don't think she stopped studying, but now she was
Mhm.
having fun and
And
felt
popular.
more like an in girl, and or with the more popular people.
Mm,
And yeah, so she's hanging out with Robert, this African American from the Cleveland neighborhood. Um, and she falls in love, and she gets pregnant.
mm.
And the and once she got pregnant, it wasn't as easy or as pretty as she thought it would be. He
So
started
your
treating
so
her
your mo
differently.
so your mother was Jewish. Did she have, like, any connection to her heritage
My
at all? Or
No, that's a good question. I think my grandmother occasionally would buy kosher meat from the kosher butcher,
Mm,
which might have had meat from Rabbi Kazin, who was the
mhm,
pioneer shliach in Cleveland, Ohio. But
mhm,
she didn't know the Chabad, she didn't know the Kazins. My mother didn't know anything about it. If anything, they were a middle class American family. Didn't My grandfather was a factory worker.
mhm.
They had really no connection with the from community, besides the fact that they knew that they were European Jewish, both her great grandparents.
Mhm. What was your grandmother's reaction to her becoming pregnant?
It's a good question. It seems to me, from what I'm told, is that, and it makes sense knowing my grandparents, that they were just they, they weren't the type to be disciplinarians or tough or angry. They were very
Mm,
supportive. They definitely didn't give her a hard time about not dating somebody non-Jewish or dating somebody black. They were going to actually sign for her, even though she wasn't 18. They were willing to sign for her to get married.
mm.
Um, they had plans to go to City Hall and stuff. Um,
So how
I
old was
think they
she?
had
She was 17 at the time?
My mother was 17 when she gave birth to me, correct?
Oh,
And
wow.
yes,
Okay. Okay. Wow. So what happens next?
what happens next is Robert starts mistreating my mother. He starts
Mm,
getting physical with her, getting violent. He was drinking a lot, cheating on her,
mm,
um, and and verbally abusing her, just making her life a living hell.
mm,
She she really felt that she was in love. She didn't want to end it or leave, as we see sometimes or often with women who are involved with domestic abuse.
mhm.
She thought she could make it work and thought he was the right one. But that was the first time she says in her life that she started to pray, that she started
Oh, wow. Mm,
to ask God, whoever you are, wherever you are, to please help Robert love me, and that everything should be beautiful and that everything should work
mm.
out. So that was, I mean, she says the first time she really tapped into any form of prayer.
Wow, she must have felt so alone.
Probably.
Yeah. Yeah, wow. So this was before she had the before she had you, or this was after that he
It sounds to me like during the pregnancy already things were not so
were not
great.
go yeah.
When she gave birth to me, my understanding is that she was still physically at home with my grandparents, but that my biological father, that Robert, used to come around a lot. He was there all the time. I don't know if he was living there. It's not so clear to me.
Mhm,
Um, I don't usually like to pry too much, but with my mother,
mhm,
but it sounds to me like they were pretty much together.
Mhm.
and then things, for her at least, hit the pinnacle, or it became a type of a day of self reflection for her. When I was 6 months old, he walks in one and sees my grandmother holding me and starts screaming and yelling at her, and tells
Mm.
her, "I don't want you to ever touch my child. Keep your hands off of him." And my mother, who was very close to her parents and really, very close to her mother, saw that. She saw the hurt in her eyes. She saw how it impacted her, and saw how much she was hurt. And she tells me that even though she was able to endure for herself, and she just,
Mhm.
figured it'd always get better for herself, when she started to see how much it was hurting her family and other people, she said, "I have to make a change." And at that point, she
Wow.
made the decision that she told my grandmother, "I'm ready, and I'm ready to leave, you know, help me get out of here."
Hmm. So how would she get away from him? Like, how would that happen?
Well, that story actually goes back a little earlier. My uncle Maish, who now lives in Israel, married and lives in Israel, but at the time, he was a young, eccentric guy, a little different. He loved wearing red.
Mm.
I don't know. Even as a kid growing up, I remember him always wearing red. His red yarmulke, his red shirt, his red pants.
Hmm.
That was his shtick. But he's on the streets in the summer of 1975.
So this is
Um,
your mother's brother, right?
Correct, her
Yeah.
eldest brother. She has
Mhm.
two brothers. This was her oldest brother,
Mhm.
and he was walking the streets of Cleveland, downtown Cleveland, and it's Chabad yeshiva students, rabbinical students, came up to him and asked him if he'd
Mm.
like to put on tefillin, if he's Jewish. He said, "Yeah," and he himself was like, "These guys are my type of guys. I mean, look at that.
Yeah.
They have such pride that they don't care what people think of them. They're wearing their hats, their jackets in 90-degree weather,
Mm.
beards." And he really connected with them. It really felt something. So he
Mm.
started hanging out at the Chabad of Cleveland with the Levskis and their Chabad house, and
Mm.
that's eventually became his second home. I mean, he was there all the time.
Mhm.
Um, and so when it comes, flash forward, I'm 6 months old in 1976, and my grandmother's trying to help my mother get out of there and get into a safer situation. She starts calling domestic abuse shelters, and not one shelter would take my mother because she wasn't 18 yet. They said, "We
Oh.
can't take her."
Mhm.
So feeling a little hopeless, they knew of Chabad. They just knew that these were Jewish rabbis that were helping my uncle, or that he was studying with. So they gave a call and asked, "Hey, can you help us out?" So Mrs. Vorolevsky said, "No problem." She immediately said yes. Took my mother and 6-month-old baby into the house,
Into her own
and
house.
into their own house. We
Wow.
were literally in their house.